Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Future and Dignity of Work, Building an Inclusive 21st Century Workforce. My name is Robert Blaine. I'm a senior executive with the National League of Cities. And with me today, we have Vince Williams, the mayor of Union City, Georgia. Maha.
Come on, you can do better than that.
Maha Jweied.
Let's pull other people in here.
That's right, that's right. She is the Chief Strategy Officer for Responsible Business Initiatives for Justice, and Marcus Glover, the co-founder of Lockstep Ventures.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to have an inclusive workforce and the different ways that we can look at that from the context of both city government, organizations that are focused on that, and also from the venture capital world. So, Mayor Williams, I wanted to start with you. And, you know, there's many definitions of the word dignity. But as a mayor of a city, what does dignity mean to you, and how does that impact the way you lead your community?
Well, that's a very good question, Dr. Blaine. And, you know, when you think about dignity, we know what the dictionary meaning is for it. But, you know, in what we do in cities every day, you know, dignity in the workforce in Union City and in so many cities across America means ensuring the opportunity to be part of the workforce is available to all residents, you know, and we've got to make sure this element of dignity, but inclusion and equity, that's what's so important, and that's what it means to me and how we drive and make it meaningful for those men and women who are looking for opportunity. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Maha, from the standpoint of thinking about the business world and what that means, how do you think about dignity? What does that look like?
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for including me today and to be with this panel. Yeah, I mean, I would reflect very much what the mayor said. I think really when we think about dignity, we also think about communities and individuals being able to join and be fruitful within their communities. That includes people who are justice impacted, so that when they're re-entering their communities, they actually have a real meaningful chance to be able to join the workforce, support themselves and their families. Because we know that's often the crux for whether or not you recidivate or not, is being able to really have opportunity and to be included in our economies and our fairness and our systems.
So I want to take one more step with that, and you were talking about folks returning back and what it means. How do you look at the barriers that are there for people returning back and actually building ways, mechanisms to be able to solve for some of those barriers to provide that dignity for someone that's returning?
Well, there's multiple ways, and really for a conference like this focusing on municipalities and cities, employers who are working in those environments, really thinking about clean slate opportunities, which I'll define a bit more in a moment, and as well as bail reform. These are two areas in which I feel like I'm competing with these folks, so I might get really loud. I don't intend to hurt your ears, but in any case, clean slate reform is the idea that individuals who have returned to society, either they were put in jail or they were incarcerated, and have a criminal record, because quite honestly, 70 million Americans have criminal records. It's astounding. And 1 in 4 black men will either go to jail or prison, which is much more dramatic than the statistics for white men. It's 1 in 23, which is also remarkable. But all to say, the idea that people with records who are then able to rejoin their communities and be able to actually have taken time away from that part of their life, they've not recidivated, there's opportunities for them to be able to clean seal, as we call it, their records. This doesn't eliminate it, so if law enforcement needs to go and look, they can look. But what it does mean is that people who are trying to get employment, housing, education, there's so many places in which background checks are used that automatically screen out people for no other reason than they have a record. And so really there's opportunities increasingly to be able to have an automated technological process to allow for people who already as a right have the opportunity to have these records sealed, have it done automatically for them. And that requires leadership by municipal leaders. It requires leadership by the business community to say that this is in fact worthy of being done and can be done. And there's a movement across the country to really advance this, where many states are now considering it. 7 states have adopted it. So that's one. And then the second one is around bail reform. You know, bail, the point of bail should be to ensure that anyone who's been charged with a crime is not a flight risk or a safety risk to their community. But across the country, money is the substitute for determining whether or not someone should be held pre-trial. And what that means is if you're wealthy and you're a flight risk or you're a safety risk, you can post bail and get out. But if you're poor, you can't. And what does that mean? It means that you can't go to work, you'll likely lose your job, you might lose your children. And so really reconsidering the ways in which we have the system of pretrial incarceration, detention, is critical. And I'll just give an example. The federal system, there's no money bail. The federal system since the 60s, actually Robert Kennedy was the one who pushed this forward to consider the ways in which we could have these other assessments to determine if someone's a flight risk or a safety risk and not using money as a proxy for determining that. So these are two real ways in which the business community, the municipalities that are represented today can really consider how you allow people to remain parts of their society when they can actually support their families, support themselves, and be able to be really productive in their communities.
That's fantastic. That's great. Marcus, you are coming at this from a different angle.
I am colorful.
You are colorful, yes, and in many ways, but coming at this from
you
a
don't
different
even
angle.
know.
So I've heard about this from the municipal angle. I've heard about organizations working in this way, but not from the venture capital world. How from the standpoint of venture capital, are you really promoting this idea of dignity and what that means for people when they're returning?
So, boy, that's a big question. How's everybody doing? How are y'all? Thank you guys for coming to our panel, Smart City, right? So there's Smart City, so there's got to be an equal and opposite. There's got to be a dumb city, right? So let's talk about dumb cities for a minute, right? What are dumb cities? What are dumb cities? They are cities that are extractive of their communities, right? They take from people, they take from marginalized communities, they put them in harm's way, and they don't create environments where you can keep people from suffering and harm. So the opposite is then is true of smart cities. We're talking about communities that are in need of care and have progressive thinkers like Maha and the mayor who are looking at methods that can keep people from recidivating, for example. Taking the capital incentive out of these structures like mass incarceration, right? So these are progressive, smart cities, smart thinkers. And then the question is, what is the role of capital in these smart cities? And then, it isn't long before you've got to start to ask, like, what is the history of capital in the US? Has it always been on the side of smart cities? And the answer is no. So I work in an element of private investment called venture capital, right? The history of private equity and venture capital in the US was what? Plantation slavery. The black body was the first investable asset in the United States of America. Think about that. Wow. You're in a Google stock, you're in, Tesla. Think about a growing asset called the black body. So I work in an industry that doesn't have a terribly good track record. Can we all agree?
I agree.
Right? So I don't even like to use the term venture capital because I'm not really here to cheerlead and promote for something that has been, through its entire history, largely extractive, right? So what I like to think about is conscious capital and how we can, there's many that like to say that guns don't kill people, people kill people, right? They try to say that the gun isn't the weapon, the mind is the weapon, the person behind the gun is the weapon. Well, I like to think about the same thing with capital. Capital is not extractive, people are extractive. But capital can be conscious, it can be additive, it can be and provide an element of care. And so that is what Lockstep Ventures, my venture fund, has begun to think about, is how we can use the instrument of private investment to invest in founders of color who are tackling big problems. And the great thing about, I think, capitalism is there's real accountability. Unlike at moments government, unlike at moments, the foundation and philanthropic world, where accountability can sometimes be, a little in the gray, people want to know, where is my money? And what is my money doing? How is it performing, right? So this is the good of venture, is it does demand accountability. And I think the thing that we have begun to think about is how we can put pressure on the system of venture and private equity to be more responsive to communities, because that's the missing piece. I believe that our business schools, one of my heroes is W.E.B. Du Bois, right? He was the first person of color ever to attend Harvard University. And what did he say? Harvard has destroyed more good Negroes than bad whiskey, right? Remember that. And so I like to think about the business schools as training all of our minds all wrong, right? Because all they're doing is training you into shareholder value to the shareholder, the investor, beholden to the shareholder. And what we now need to do is move to the model of stakeholder capitalism, value to the stakeholder. And who is the stakeholder? That's us, communities, interests, and how we become responsible to and responsive to those interests. So one of the things that we have put into practice with Lockstep Ventures is what we call a fair chance hiring rider, right? And the old expression is, he or she who pays the piper, what? Calls the tune. So if you accept our capital, then you accept our mandates. So if you can imagine, there was this young entrepreneur named Jeff Bezos. And he said, I have this idea to transform the world through this thing called e-commerce. And what did he do? He went to venture capital and said, I have this vision where Walmarts and Target stores, people are not going to drive anymore. We will drive the goods and services to them. And it was venture capitalists like me who said, I believe in your vision. Here's $1 million. Get that idea off the ground. But imagine if that investor who met with Jeff Bezos had said, I'm not only going to give you that $1 million, but I'm going to make you sign a pledge that as you build your $1 trillion company, you are beholden to stakeholders. You will put fulfillment centers in communities that are in need of, commercial opportunities. You will use fair chance hiring methods so that people who will come out of, we might not even have 70% or greater recidivation, people going back to jail, if an Amazon had a pledge to hire from the formerly incarcerated. Might not even be an issue in our culture, right? So what you see is there's no lack of capital, there's a lack of imagination. And so that's the role, I believe, of sort of the future of venture, is to reimagine society and to hopefully be on the side of smart city and not dumb city.
I love that. I love that. It reminds me of something that my mayor used to say when I was in Jackson, Mississippi. He said, we want to build the economy out of the surplus of labor that was not afforded an opportunity in the previous one. Wow. And I really think that that's beautiful, the way that you're actually creating a framework for that. I love that. Mayor Williams, yeah. This idea of dignity, I think, is really, and you alluded to it before. You talked about inclusivity and what that looks like. When you think about building an inclusive ecosystem in Union City, Georgia, you've created these sets of partners that all come together around this framework that you've designed, really thinking about what an inclusive workforce looks like. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, really what we've done in Union City is, we have had an explosion of job growth and job creation in the city. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure is that the partners at the table, not that they weren't just hiring individuals, that they were investing in the people and the community. You know, when you talk about a disproportionate part of your community being left out of the equation, you have to remember many of those, and certainly Maha spoke to this, many of those individuals that have been incarcerated and been released, they are our future, many of them are our future entrepreneurs. So we got to look at what do we do, and part of that is even something as small as getting business licenses. Those are things that we've got to look at as it relates to municipalities. But we got to make sure that the entire community, and that is the biggest part and the biggest challenge, getting the business community to sit at the table, because they know what it's going to take to be successful in these jobs and opportunities that they have. But also it's going to take investment in workforce. It's going to take investment in housing. It's going to take investment in education. So it's a whole mix of partnerships. And, you know, we have certainly partnered with the Amazons in our city, ASOS, Walmart e-commerce, you name it. But one of the biggest partners we have is the Atlanta Metro Studios, because the film industry is a huge part of our economy in Union City and the state of Georgia at this time. So, you know, we've got to make sure that we open up the windows of opportunity and not exclude people just because they have a past. Because, you know, one of the things I talk about often, we all have a past. Many of us just didn't get caught in some of the things that we've done. You know, so the thing is creating opportunities for those people to help them not even consider recidivism. You know, so when you keep people out of opportunity, they create their own opportunity, good or bad.
You know, one of the things that struck me about what you were saying is that so many times when we talk about returning citizens and the challenges, we're looking at lower skill set jobs. We're looking at jobs that, frankly, at a Smart City Conference are at risk of automation. Those jobs could disappear in a little while. The jobs that you're talking about seem much more sustainable to me, and sustainable in the community. How do you think about bringing that kind of sustainability of the workforce to Union City?
Well, I think it's very important to have that in not just Union City, but every city, because we are transitioning. You know, when you think about AI and automation, that is, you know, technology is changing as we sit today. You know, so we got to make sure that everyone is prepared for the future of work, if you will, and making sure that everyone has that opportunity. But Union City is at the forefront of what we do each and every day. You know, we sit right at the front door of the world's busiest airport, you know, however you want to class it. And certainly we are part of the Metro Atlanta area. So it's important that we make sure that we are a big player, and not because we are a small city under the size of 50,000 population. We have an influx of over anywhere from 150 to 200,000 people passing through our city each and every day. So we've got to make sure that we create the housing that's desired, but also the other opportunities for work, you know, for those individuals in our city. And, you know, I know we're talking about smart cities, and I want to really lean on this issue around formerly incarcerated individuals, because that's important. I just had a ribbon cutting 2 weeks ago with an individual. He and his wife, they just opened a tractor trailer repair business. And he informed me that he had spent 10 years in prison for robbery. And that time in prison, he said he took every class he could to make himself better, because he didn't want to spend the rest of his life in prison. And he vowed to his family, and even his mother, he shared even to his mother before she passed, that he would never end back up in prison. And now this young man, they have over 100 tractor trailers that he and his wife own, you know, but also now he's opening up an opportunity for other men and women to be able to come and learn a very needed trade, and that is repairing tractor trailers, because that's where all our goods and services are being delivered.
I would love to hop on that point.
Yes, sir.
That's okay. And So in your question, I would love to reframe your question because we're talking about the dignity of work. There's tremendous dignity in blue collar work. So like I'm invested in a trucking enterprise, trucking management, logistics. Trucking is a good blue collar job. As American job gets is a job in trucking.
Yeah.
If you had followed the growth curve of e-commerce, we would have hit in year 20 years from now, we would have hit the natural growth curve for e-commerce. But through COVID, we hit 20 years of growth in 18 months.
18 months.
Trucking is an industry that is aging out. More people are driving for ride-sharing platforms. There are not enough trucks on the road. I invested in a trucking enterprise. One of their other investors was a transportation venture fund, and it didn't matter to them if they were in trucking or deep space. Anything that required hauling. So they had an investment in the company we invested. They invested in autonomous vehicles. They invested in SpaceX, sending hauls to Mars, okay? And I asked them this question. Autonomous driving in trucks. You guys I said, you're invested in this. They said, it will never happen. You're not hearing me. It will never happen. You hear all this on the news, self-driving trucks and Tesla self-driving trucks. They said, it will never happen. It will never happen because why? An autonomous truck can't be 99% right. If you go on to YouTube, you see the videos of the car running off the road on its own. There's podcasts on it. It can't be 99% right. It has to be 99.9999999% right. And it's not. And the vast majority of trucking is what they call last mile.
Yes.
So if you can imagine in your city, in your cities, an autonomous truck, and let's remember, a lot of these trucks are what? They're carrying home heating fuel, kerosene, gasoline, right? That's high explosives. They're never going to be driving down Broadway autonomously because you know what? It's not long before Russia is able to hack into that truck, take over the operating system, and what? That becomes a missile. So trucking, aging out, we don't have enough truck drivers on the road, and what does the company that I invested in do? They staff with formerly incarcerated people. They go behind bars when people are in the final months or year of serving their time, and they teach them. People don't know this. A CDL license, a commercial driver's license, you can obtain having had a criminal record, right? And so this is a way, by the way, as we all know, these jobs pay $80, $90, $100,000 a year. There is an ad if you go to Walmart, the minimum salary they pay to their job. Anybody want to guess? Walmart minimum salary, any guessers? Any guessers? How much? $15. Any others? $120,000 a year. How many of you now are like, damn, maybe I need to be a truck driver? Okay, so this is an example of how, and by the way, important data point. Maha will tell you this. 95% of the 2.4 million people who are behind bars, some form of detention today, 95% of them will release out. They will come back into your communities. And so the question belongs to society. What condition do we want society in? Do we want people destitute with a bias against them, unable to find gainful employment, unable to vote, unable to get access to housing? Because guess what? That is a quick solution for recidivation. Doing what you did to get into jail again. So this is the importance of the private and public partnerships that we're creating to find opportunities for people who have been impacted. Sorry for my rant.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And I think it closely ties to the question that I was about to ask Maha, which is you have a technology that you're using to really think about workforce and justice and how those two are related. Could you talk a little bit about the way that you use technology as a solution?
Sure, and this really goes to, again, the leaders from the municipalities who are here, but also the business leaders who care about these issues. And that is, again, going back to this notion of clean slate. This is technology that is really being advanced across the country to allow for the automation of individuals with records to be able to clean up those conditions under which they're still being locked out of opportunity, but for which we've determined as a society through legislation that they still get a chance to have that sealed and squashed down. And so what I mean by that, this is the use of technology in an innovative way that benefits society in the justice system. Often, being someone who is a lawyer and has been working in this field for a while, often innovations that are legally minded in the legal system do the reverse. They tend to catch up people. They tend to create systems in which expediency is valued over dignity and rights. But really, this notion of clean slate automation allows for individuals who have the opportunity and the right to have their records be sealed, have it done for them. And the reason why that matters, it's really expensive. To have your record sealed costs anywhere from $500 to $2,000. Can you imagine that? Plus, you have to know about it. And there's many, many studies that demonstrate that people just don't know about their legal rights or opportunities. So by being able to do this automatically through technology, municipalities are saying that they are standing with their employers, but also the individuals in their society who deserve a chance. And I want to give a couple of statistics. I have to read them just to remember them. So first I said earlier, 70 million people in the US have a criminal record. And to the point about job opportunity, there's a labor shortage. I mean, that is just the truth. We continue to see that year after year. 11 million jobs are open at the moment. So by having these conditions under which people are being excluded from consideration, employers, this is businesses, it's governments, they are losing out on a part of the talent community that they can tap into. And furthermore, $87 billion a year are lost due to underemployment of individuals. So really, in this instance, there's really no sensibility in not considering our entire community as potential opportunities to be able to give them employment and to re-enter the society in a way that allows them to actually join and support their communities in a thoughtful manner. And just the last thing to say, I was sort of implicit in what I was saying at the start, but our legal system is stacked with so many racial disparities. I'm sure many folks in this room don't need me to say that, but I'm referencing that because it's important to recognize that these opportunities to clean up people's records really also allow for us to advance racial equity in our society, recognizing that not only does that mean that the person, again, the statistics, 1 in 4 black men as compared to 1 in 23 white men will have either jail or incarceration. It's not just that one moment, it's all of the downstream effects that come from being caught up in the legal system. So just to say again, there's this real opportunity for leaders from both private, public sector, as well as, of course, investors to really consider the ways in which that they can bring forward together opportunity for individuals in their society. I'm noticing time.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. Good. Marcus, you talked a little bit about this agreement that you have with the funds that you're supplying. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how you came to that agreement?
For sure. I want to acknowledge my partner and my little daughter back there, the little 7-month-old. Super happy to have them
That's
here.
A great agreement back there.
Sitting next to them is a gentleman named Perfecto Sanchez, who's an impact thinker, strategist, and he sort of helped us to rip up the floorboards because, think about in each of your cities and towns, think about that moment where you walk into a corporate headquarters, right, an office building, and you go to the directory and there's something called A to Z Capital or Houston Holdings. And you think to yourself, the hell is Houston Holdings, right? You've had that moment where you're like, I've never heard of this company. But what you don't know is behind those doors, they're probably controlling $1 billion in assets. I have a friend who is a municipal bond trader, okay? He sits on a 30th floor or higher in New York City as a bond trader. Mayors like ours here and others have a bond. They go to New York, they sit in an office and they say, we're building a school or we're building a bridge. We need a little help. Can you underwrite this bond? This bond is backed by good tax-paying money and, you know, we collect revenues. You can call Moody's. We're AAA rated. And it's my friend's duty to take that bond and underwrite it with private investors. But what he also talks about is that occasionally there's a city, and that city will present a bond, and it's to build a jail. Sometimes it's a juvenile jail. And he talks about how he, as one guy who lives in downtown Brooklyn, is sitting in an office and he ultimately presses go or no go and decides the fates of thousands. Many of you perhaps at this conference are in that position, right? And so he talks about the role of capital, again, using that shareholder value. Do you just deliver those returns, that bond yield to your investor? Or do you say there's stakeholders involved, there's communities? Now, in this particular instance, the town was building this juvenile jail. And it was a part of the state of New Jersey that was at least 90 miles out in cow country, right? 90 miles out in cow country. Now, no one was thinking, what does it take for parents or loved ones to get from the city of Newark 90 miles away to go visit this loved one, right? But he had enough consciousness to think to himself, like, there's a human toll to building this jail out in cow country. And what he did was he tried to galvanize enough pressure to say, folks, move this jail 60 miles back east so it's not such a hardship, right? And so these are the kinds of decisions that in these, you know, nondescript offices behind closed doors, these are the kinds of decisions that are being made. And you have zero visibility on this. There's no transparency, but all of a sudden, there's a jail in the middle of New Jersey that all of a sudden parents are having to hitch a ride to or figure out a bus, several buses to get to. And so what Lockstep is thinking about is how do we create more accountability to communities with the capital that we invest in? So we asked that first question, what is the role of capital? And the role of capital has to be reparative. We do believe in investor returns. We do want to create market returns for our investors, but we have to create impact metrics. We happen to believe that, as the mayor said, many entrepreneurs, or I should say many people who are behind bars, let's be honest, they got there because they're pretty good entrepreneurs, right? Many of them are great salespeople. They're just selling an illegal product. They know a lot about distribution. They know a lot about manufacturing, right? They know a lot about chemistry, quality control, right? They've had to think about all these topics, you know, just unfortunately on the wrong side of the law. But that talent can be put to work for productive uses. So, you know, I meet routinely with colleagues who are like, I met this guy, he's got a criminal record. I'm like, is he a good entrepreneur? He's actually one of the more impressive, okay? There is a role for how capital can invest in people who have had criminal histories and to provide jobs that will not only grow and scale companies, but will create these impact metrics. And those are the questions that we began to ask. that resulted in creating what we call the Fair Chance or Second Chance Hiring Rider. And we consulted with our attorneys. They're labor and employment attorneys. And we asked them, is this allowed? Can we do this? Can we actually say, you want our money? This is the rule. You've got to use these policies. And they said, yeah, it's legal. So we wrote the rider. We send a term sheet. The term sheet will spell out the commercial terms. We'll be willing to invest $500,000. And at the fine print at the bottom, it says you will use Fair Chance Hiring and make your best attempt at hiring from underserved communities and people who may have suffered from cycles of incarceration. And then at the end of the year, we audit that. So we want to put a head count attached to that. And so that's kind of the way we work. But, you know, again, it's thinking innovatively. It's using the imagination to reimagine how capital can be a force for good and helping to create health for cities. So
I love that. And with that topic of innovation, we've got 3 minutes to end. So each one, with 1 minute, how does innovation affect the way that you think about a inclusive 21st century workforce and what that looks like in your community? And I'll start with you, Mayor Williams.
You know, innovation is extremely important, but one of the things we've got to make sure in dealing with innovation is that we don't lose sight and continue to prioritize people first jobs in all of our communities. You know, we cannot, and I can't stress it enough, we cannot leave the people out of the equation regardless of what their background is, because there is value in each and every individual in our communities, and we've got to find out, where do we place that value, where do we place that individual, where is that opportunity for them? So innovation, making sure that people are prepared for this new workforce, this new future of work, because certainly what we are looking at as we continue to evolve with technology and AI and automation, you know, when you think about the young, I mean, people in elementary school can do some of the things right now, you know, that many of us could never imagine could be done. So those are the things we got to do, is harness that innovation and making sure that we're in lockstep and step with our school systems to make sure that people are prepared for these opportunities.
That's great. And Maha, I want to take it one step further for you, because you have an innovation, and in my opinion, it needs to be scaled on a massive level. So how do you take that, the innovation that you have, and really think about what that looks like to scale that so that it truly creates the kind of impact that we're looking for?
I appreciate the question. I mean, I'll say part of innovation is new thinking. And so really, the fact that this innovation exists, what it needs is implementers. So we need the innovation also in the ways that people approach and understand how to solve problems in new ways. So both really those of you, again, who are in leadership positions in your cities and counties and municipalities, or those that have influence. Again, I'm with a nonprofit, but we work with the business community to exert their influence with other parts of our sectors, especially government, to advance change. But I would encourage those of you who have the ability to think, to actually create the change, that you would do so, and to think about two main things. One is this clean slate technology. That's really critical. But the second goes to what the mayor was talking about, and that's about, and also actually Mr. Glover was talking about, and that is about licensing. So, you know, there's a lot of restrictions for folks with records to get any measure of licenses for them to be able to do a job. Not just driver's licenses, but there's 4,000 collateral consequences. There's so many collateral consequences for having been to prison or have a record, not even having gone to prison, but just even being charged. So what I mean by that is that also often municipalities have the ability to erase some of those restrictions so that people who have those realities in their background don't have that as a barrier to new opportunities in the future. So innovation is with all of us, really. It's not just the technology.
That's amazing. And Marcus, one last question for you. With all of the work that you're doing, and it's so amazing, how do we codify this so that it doesn't exist just with your venture capital, but it becomes kind of a blueprint that can be replicated?
Well, that's exactly it. That's why we stood it up. We're a small $50 million venture fund, which is small in the whole ecosystem of private investment firms. You hear about the BlackRocks and the Carlyles that are deploying, 300 billion. We're 50 million. So we are a pebble in the sea. However, we have an important use case to share where doesn't matter that we're just 50. We're standing up a practice that will demonstrate at the end of the day that you can deliver market rate returns. You don't have to, Wolf of Wall Street, where you're running around, like the sky is falling unless you create, 10x returns. You're not delivering to your investors. You can create comfortable returns, but you can also create some innovation around the culture and advance things in the world. So I think it just is continuing to use the innovation, create storytelling, create the campfire, situations like we're coming in a circle and sharing these new narratives and spreading them. And I think that's how we move this forward.
It's wonderful. Well, 40 minutes went by really, really quickly. I feel like we could go for another 4 hours, but this has been amazing. Please join me in thanking our panelists today for this wonderful session.